Good day, welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another inbox review. This one is Hasegawa's F18 Hornet, particularly the A model. This one I've had in the stash for quite a while. Actually, I bought it in England. If you look here, you will see there is a price in pounds. I believe I got it at Hannett's probably, and it would have been the late 80s, which makes sense, because this kit actually dates back to 1985. It was a new tool, and since then Hasegawa's released almost 50 revisions of this, either new decals mostly or the odd time with a couple of new parts. But essentially, if you're buying a F18A Hornet brand new these days, this is the mold you're working from. So this will be a very good review, I think, for people. So anyway, let's get right to it. Standard Hasegawa box art at the time for the 80s. A couple of sample pictures of a completed kit. And as I said, just the usual end stuff, nothing exciting other than the price. £4.59, pretty good deal if you could get that today. Alright, moving on to the box, which is fairly stuffed as normally happens. So I'm just going to take everything out and we'll go through each of them one at a time. Alright, so starting with some of the parts. I've actually already opened the bags, and I will take them out and we'll go through the sprues. So starting with the canopy. Yes, the canopy was not bagged separately. Pretty standard for that at the time. Two-piece canopy, looks fairly in good shape. Not bad at all, fairly crisp. No scratches or mold lines, that what I can see. So that looks in good shape. First sprue we're going to have here is the wing assembly. As you can see, the main wings are a one-piece, you don't have to put two halves together. Finely recessed panel lines. Details very crisp. Hasegawa was always good for this, even back then. Landing gear looks actually very detailed. And the landing gear doors, etc. So yeah, very nice. Couple of sink marks on the doors, on the inside landing gear doors, but I think those can be fairly easily sanded away. But just some little detail here and there, and again a couple more sink marks there on the inside of those doors. Don't know if you can quite see it. I'll see if I can bring it up for you so you can. There you go. Very hard to see, but yeah, it's very subtle. And again, just a couple of passes with a sanding stick I think will solve that. Okay, moving on. This is the underside of the main fuselage and parts of the intake. As you can see, there's details pre-molded into the landing gear bays. Some basic details. Those who want to make it even more pretty would have no problem there, but there's some good basic details for those of us who just want to stick with that. Intakes, the landing gear wheels, again they look in fairly good shape. Intakes, the nose here looks very good. Again, just some fine detail. Overall, yep, nothing exciting, but again, good quality when you consider this mold dates, from how far back this mold dates. Let's go on to the top of the main fuselage, and this will give you an idea of how big the aircraft is when it's built. So top half, again, some excellent molding on the panel lines. Very attractive looking. You have some of the Sparrow and Sidewinder missile ornaments. A pilot here, and a separate one for the arms, so you can position that. Another one of the landing gear doors, as I said, some of the Sidewinders and Sparrows. Again, looks like fairly good quality. I like the way the fuselage comes together, more along natural seam lines. I've heard from what I've read in online reviews, and heard from people who've built this kit, the fit's actually fairly good. So not too much problem. So hopefully will be a straightforward build, particularly in this section. And then moving on, we have some more of the drop tanks and ECM pods, things like that. So again, fairly straightforward. Some nice recessed details there for the tanks. Very straightforward. Yeah, nothing else really to criticize or whatever. Again, 1985 mold, so but fairly good quality. All right, moving on. Hasegawa's instructions from the 80s. It's a little bit of color. There's a splash of color being in blue. Typical color call-outs at the time, and weapons and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, we'll start. So some pictures of the kit. Little explanation showing how you can put on some of the weapons. Now note, some of the weapons mentioned here, like the bombs and that, do not come with the kit. But Hasegawa does, and they still sell weapon add-on sets that you could purchase. So things like bombs and stuff like that. This one comes with some drop tanks, an ECM pod, and some sparrows and sidewinders. But there is no bombs mentioned, but there is some mention here if you choose to do it that way. Okay, moving on, fairly straightforward instructions, and with the build process. Oh yeah, this is something I always found interesting. When they built the seat, they put the ejection seat in two parts, which I found rather odd. But again, for a lot of people, if they would have the pilot in, you're not going to see it. But let me just go back to that particular part on the sprue. So there's the ejection seat right there. There you go. And as I say, it comes in two parts, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes together. Again, I haven't heard a lot of people criticize that, at least that I recall. But again, it'll be interesting to see as I do build videos of this, how it goes together. So again, fairly straightforward construction. You can see how it all goes, the main fuselage, stuff like that. One thing I like about this kit is I'll be able to assemble the main fuselage and then paint it and everything, and then you can put on your landing gear doors fairly easily, or whatever other goodies you want below. Again, going through, color callouts are of course the Mr. Hobby. They've also got the Gunzy callouts there, so you can compare. Standard for the time. Okay, moving on to the back, you've got the entire back end is the decaling setup, fairly detailed. As you know, with U.S. Navy aircraft, there's a lot of stencils you can add. And again, people decide if they want to add them all or not. They can be very small. 3 different schemes, 2 U.S. Navy, or sorry, 1 U.S. Navy scheme, VFA 113, a Marine scheme, VMFA 531, and 1 Dominican Canadian Forces F18 Hornet. I haven't decided quite yet which one I'm going to do, but I'm probably going to lean to the F18, or the CF18 of the Canadian Forces. All right, let's look at the decals. I'm sorry, just the other sheet that you get with it is your standard warning thing about, you know, work at a well-ventilated space, don't cut your finger off, things like that. So fairly straightforward, a little brief explanation of how to put on decals. Okay, the decal sheet. I tend to put my decal sheets, protect them. So again, fairly good, low visibility scheme decals. They cram a lot into a tiny sheet. So again, if you're doing stencils, that's going to make it fun. Again, as older modelers, we sometimes our vision, but this is definitely going to need a magnifying glass for some of these. If I put all the stencils on, I don't usually. Again, I build for what makes me happy, and if I start grumbling because I have 100 stencils to put on, then I'm probably not going to do it. But again, some fairly nice decals. Hopefully they're in good shape. They're showing their age a little bit, so I'm going to do the old trick of putting it in the sunlight. There's a little bit of yellowing here as I'm looking at this. It's tough to see on camera, but I do see it here. So again, I'll stick these out in the sunlight for a while and see what I can come up with. If they don't work, then I'll get some aftermarket ones. As I say, Hasegawa's released this kit over the years with so many different decal options. Looking at scale mates for it, I see here that the kit is the last reissue of this kit, of this mold, was actually last year, 2016. And it was a 2-kit adversary scheme, which looked very attractive. And the one before that was one commemorating the Canadian Air Force for the Battle of Britain, and that's a nice looking scheme as well. So yeah, the Canadian Forces did a Battle of Britain 75th anniversary one. So yeah, so that's it for the box review. Looks like, again, it's going to be a fun little kit. These Hasegawa kits back then actually went together very, very well. I remember building a few of them. So I've got a few other 72nd U.S. Navy aircraft I've gotten over the years, and I'd like to probably the last 30 years. So yeah, there is some of these in this size I want to build up. We'll see how it does. I have been leaning more towards 48 scale for a lot of my stuff, but these are fun little kits. So hopefully it'll go together nicely, good simple build, and we'll go from there. So as I say, you can still find this or one of its variations in online today. So check it out. So I hope the review was helpful. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, and I've also started a podcast called the Scale Model Podcast at scalemodelpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to that as well. So that's it for this week. Thank you, and be well.